Howard Blake is a composer, conductor and pianist whose career has spanned more than 50 years. He's probably best known for providing the soundtrack to Channel 4's 1982 film The Snowman, but he's done many other things as well, including Flash Gordon, The Duelists, and the music for Princess Diana's 30th birthday. And he's on the line here just now. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm okay, thank you.
Great. So, how did you first get into music and composing originally then?
I think I was born playing the piano. I remember actually being told I mustn't touch the piano, and we had this great old upright piano in the dining room, and then I climbed up onto a stool and I started playing it, and they said you can't play that. I actually found what the notes are. I wrote the names of the notes onto the notes in indelible pencil, and taught myself to read, and I got into terrible trouble for doing it because they couldn't get them off. That's how I started. It's a joke, really, but I started having lessons when I was about 6, and I went through, like everybody did, exams and things, and I also sang in the church choir, and I sang the solos in the church, and then when I was about 11, I also learned organ and actually I used to play in the parish church in Brighton, where I come from, when the real organist was on holiday. And then from there, I then got a very good teacher called Christine Pembridge, who really took me under her wing and said, you've been disgracefully taught. I'm going to really teach you. And she had one of the great teachers, somebody who had learnt from none other than Clara Schumann.
Wow.
So my playing actually descends from Clara Schumann, like 200 years ago. So I was well taught, and then when that got me, she entered me for a scholarship. It's the first thing I entered, which was a Hastings Festival scholarship for music, and I went in for it. And there was a Bach prize, a Beethoven prize, and a Chopin prize, and a scholarship prize. There were 4 prizes. I won all 4. So that my school were very annoyed with me because I said I'm going to take up this scholarship at the Royal Academy, and they said, we've got you down for doing a scholarship to Oxford for history. What about that? I said, I'd much rather do music. So that's how I got into it.
And do you remember what the first piece of music you ever wrote was?
Actually, the first piece that I remember writing was a march in D, and I've still got that in my catalogue. I think that's Opus 1A, I think it is. But that I wrote, I was about 10, and I sort of used to write little playthings on the piano and write little things on people's birthday cards and Christmas cards for the family, little songs. The first piece was a march, which was a proper march with a beginning and a middle and an end, and it was written out in ink, and I was about 10. And I took it into my piano teacher, and I said, I've written this. And he said, you must not lie. You couldn't possibly have written this. So I said, well, I did write it. All right, he said, I'm going to take it off you, he said. And I'm right, now you play it, and we'll see if you can play it. So I played it back from memory. My God, he said, you did write it. He said, well, I've never met that boy of 10. So we must put you on to harmony and counterpoint even, and fugue. We must start right away. That was a wonderful thing for me. I mean, which wouldn't have happened. I mean, I could have just been ignored. But he set about to teach me the theory of music, and I loved doing it. And so by the time I was sort of 14, 15, I'd really learned all matters of harmony, and I could write 2-part, 3-part counterpoint.
Yeah.
So that was very lucky. He was a little old guy called Bonnie Churcher, and he wore a butterfly collar and an old-fashioned bow tie to teach me.
I love that name, Bonnie Churcher.
Bonnie Churcher, yeah.
Yeah.
And he really got me off to a great start there.
Yeah.
Then when I was in Ditchling Road Primary School in Brighton, and then I won the 11 plus to the grammar school, which was a very good school that had been a public school until the Labour government came along in 1945, and it became a grammar school. So I went, and it was a super school. And when I went there, they did Gilbert and Sullivan operas. They did one every year. And in this year, I went to the school. It was 1954, I think. They were doing the Gilbert and Sullivan opera Ruddy Gore, and it had a part for a girl. Rose Maybud was the soprano heroine. Yeah. And in my first week at grammar school, the music master there, Mr. Albert Chapman, he gave us, everybody in the class were asked to sing a scale, and when I got up, they were singing up, no, 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 no. When I got up, because I've been having voice lifts, I sang a scale that ascended for 3 octaves. It went from I could go from middle C to a G in alt. I was all going back down to G.
Wow.
Basso. So I had this extraordinary voice, 3-octave voice, and this was almost the first day I was at grammar school, and they said, "Well, we've cast the opera, but would you like to sing in the opera?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to sing in the opera." So actually, they gave me the part of Rose Maybud, the soprano part of the opera.
Wow.
That day, and there was a boy I remember called Hilton who was going to do it, and I was much better than him. And they said, "We're sorry, we're replacing you with this little boy. He's very small, but he's got this amazing voice." And the parents were so furious, they took the boy out of the grammar school and put him in another school. Of course, trouble right from the start.
Yeah. So one of the early professional things that you did was making different musical stuff on the TV show The Avengers, wasn't it?
Yes, I mean this was really. I got to the stage of by 1967, I had got to the stage. I'd written quite a lot of music, and I'd written music for films and music for classical things, all sorts of things. But in 1967, I was taken on by an agent called Liz Keys, who was really the top agent for film composers. She represented Malcolm Arnold and some of the Americans like Copeland, and William Walton. They're very really. So that was an extraordinary step for me to have an agent like that. And the first thing she said, when I went in, and she said, "Would you like to meet Bernard Herrmann, who was also on her books?" Bernard Herrmann, of course, is now regarded as the greatest film composer of all time, having written Citizen Kane. He started with, and having worked with Hitchcock. And he wrote Psycho, of course, and many. So anyway, my first thing with Liz Keys was we went along and I met Bernard Herrmann. He said, Laurie Johnson, my friend Laurie Johnson, actually, he writes the music for the Avengers. I mean, it's which was a fully scored television series. I mean, they had music throughout, and that was recorded like every 2 or 3 weeks. You were doing a new film. So I was asked, and Bernard Herrmann, he said, Laurie Johnson, he's asked me if I would take over writing the Avengers series. He said I wouldn't know how to do that. He said it's sort of jazz music, and I don't know anything about jazz at all. So he said, "Do you think you could do it?" And I said, "Oh yeah." I said, "I would love to." I mean, what? Right? You can't be serious. Anyway, I actually what happened was I went and started the next session of the Avengers. I played piano on the not piano, Hammond organ, vibraphone, Celeste, marimba, and various things like that. I played keyboards, and I got to know how Laurie wrote. And he said, and then afterwards he said, "Would you like to take over the whole show?" So that was and the whole show. I had to write something like half an hour of fully scored music for big band a week, which was pretty. I was pretty scared of and also that was a big learning curve in my life, actually, because I hadn't ever been under that sort of pressure in writing music, and I sat there and I thought, I don't know, and I think I don't sort of know what I'm doing, and I tried play this and that, and it didn't sound original, and I thought I don't know what, and I thought actually And then my copyist from Elstree said, "Have you got your first score ready for me yet?" I hadn't started, so I thought, "Oh, this is terrible." I thought I'm just going to have to write the first thing that comes into my head. And I was writing my very first Avengers. It was called My Wildest Dream, and I've got it here in my. Yes, and I wrote that in 1960. That was early 1968. My wallet. So I thought, I've got to do. I just got to write straight away, and however bad I think it is, I've got to do it and give it to the copyist. And if what I've written is complete junk, okay, they'll throw it out and they'll say, "Well, you had a try," but I won't have let them down, and they'll pay me for doing it, and I can leave quietly, having failed. So I've never forgotten that work. I just wrote and I thought, and the first thing to come in, and I put it, and it was all more or less jazzy. I mean, that sort of stuff, but it needed quite a lot of writing, and I remember going up to Elstree, and up to that point, I'd just been playing as one as a very young-looking keyboard player, but with all these very famous tenor players and trumpet players and trombone, Don Lusher on trombone and Kenny Baker on trumpet, and Laurie got up and he said, "Howard, our young pianist, is taking over from me as writer, composer, and conductor of the Avengers as of now." Wow. And they all went, "Blimey!" And anyway, I started, and I recorded for the whole morning, and at the end, the whole band stood up and clapped. And that's something actually that only ever happened once in my career. That it isn't done to clap conductors and composers. It's just not done. But on this occasion, they were so gobsmacked by it that they did. And so that was my sort of baptism by far into the world. Very, high level, really, professional world of music writing, because that series went out in 93 countries. The Avengers. It was a very big show. Yeah. How's that for an answer?
That's pretty good. That's up there. And you've scored many films over the years, of course, including Ridley Scott's The Duelists. So how did that one come about?
Yeah, I met Ridley Scott. Curiously enough, he rang me and said, "I've made a commercial, a cinema commercial. It was for, I'm trying to think what it was for. It was for Lifebuoy soap or something of that sort. I think it was Lifebuoy soap. Well, it was a soap." And he said, I've shot it in the wilds of Scotland in the snow, and it's like Russian, and there's a Russian guy on a big horse, and it's set in this sort of period of early, sort of like 1800s to advertise his soap. And he said, "Would you like to do?" So I went in, and he said, "Could you write something like, like Borodin does, like that sounds like Russian classical music, or Rimsky-Korsakov, that sort. Yeah, I said I could do something like that. So I wrote this commercial, which was 30-second commercial, and I did. It wasn't too onerous a thing to do, but Ridley liked it a lot. And Ridley was trying to. You cannot believe this. He had a firm making commercials, and this was considered such a ghastly thing to do that nobody would ever give him a film to direct. It was the same way for his brother Tony, and they had this firm in Soho, Lexington Street, and. They were both making commercials fit to bust. I mean, I think Ridley has made something like 3,000 commercials before he before he was given a film, which is sort of extraordinary, I think.
Yeah.
And anyway, that would have been about 1970. I did that Lifebuoy soap commercial, and I didn't hear from. I might have done a couple of other little commercials for him, and then in 1975, one day he rang me up and he said, "I've got myself a producer called," and his name's David Putnam, who is of course now Lord Putnam.
Yeah.
David Putnam, and he said, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm living down in the country in Sussex, and I'm writing chamber music." And I said, "I've given up films and I've given up commercials. I'm just writing proper, serious music." And he said, "Well, I've just got my first film." And he said, "Oh," well, I said, "Oh, bully for you. Good." And he said, "And David's going to produce it, and we both want you to write the music for it." Well, I said, as I've just explained, I don't do that anymore. He said, "Well, what's the matter with you?" I said, "I'm busy writing this piano quartet." So he said, "We're coming down to see you." "Really?" I said. So he said, "How do we get there?" I said, you get a train from Victoria to Hayward Heath. Have you got a car?" I said, "Yeah, I've got a car. I'll meet you at the station." So I met these two who were not famous as they are now. Ridley Scott and David Putnam met at Hayward, and we came back to. I had this water mill, and they spoke. David said, "Does it work?" I said, "Yes." "Can we work it?" So I said, "Yes." So we spent the day mucking about. I said, "You have to open the sluice." "What's that?" I said, "Come here, pour on that big." So with the three of us, we spent a great day actually at the mill, and as the day went on, they were talking about this Duelist thing, and it got to 6 o'clock, and Ridley said, "Please come back to London with us and see the film, will you? And we'll take you out to dinner afterwards." I said, "Okay, you've won. I'll come back with you." So we got on the train back to Victoria, and I went into their studio in Lexington Street, and I saw the first frame of the Duelist, which is an extraordinary frame. There are these two duelists, and they're standing absolutely motionless against this absolutely exquisite country background, a field with beautiful trees in the distance, and it's absolutely silent. And I said, "That's the best." I said, "That's the best frame I've ever seen." And said, "What would you write for that scene?" I said, "Nothing. It was absolutely wonderful silence." I said, "Well, this is not what we want to hear." I said, "But we start the music. What then happens is they suddenly Harvey Keitel has the sword, and he actually strikes his opponent and raises blood and cuts him. I said, "That is where the music starts, and it will be as frightening as hell." After that silence. So that was, I said, so then I remember Ridley said, "Well, what would you score it for?" I said, "Well, I think we watched the whole film, and I said, I think it wants an orchestra." And at that time, everybody was actually doing electronic music and pipes music, and they weren't. I mean, the age of the orchestral scores was slightly over at that time, or hadn't, and there wasn't exactly a style. Anyway, I said, so Ridley said, I'd like it sort of electronic. And so I remember David Putnam said, listen, Ridley, Howard knows what he's doing. And you don't. You let Howard do what he thinks is right for this film, will you? So Ridley said, okay, you got it. And so I was able to write. Really, I had a free hand with the Duelist, and I loved writing it. And it was absolutely marvelous. I thought it was a brilliant film. I still do, and I actually still think it's Ridley's best film. But it was quite one. I wrote it in bits because they'd done like. There was a third of the film when I started on it, and they hadn't finished the second part. And then by the time I'd finished the music first, then I'd got the second part, and then I finished. So I wrote it in 3 sections, which followed on, and then I was straight into the studio with a wonderful orchestra, and it really went in virtually uncut, and it went straight off my manuscript on into the studio, recorded straight onto the screen as it was, and it's never been changed since. So that was actually one of the really great points of my life, writing that score.
Yeah, definitely. And you also did the music for Flash Gordon as well, which I guess naturally, because it uses a lot of Queen's music, a lot of your score didn't actually end up in the final cut, right?
Well, the Queen didn't want me to write. They didn't want me to write the music. The story of that is, I was hoping you wouldn't mention Flash Gordon. I was at home at this time. I was living in Mortlake on the Thames, and a house there, and it was a nice quiet afternoon. I got this call from John Richards, who was the engineer at the CBS studio, CTS studios out in Wembley, and John said, he said, we're in. I'm in the studio with quite a number of people, and we've got a real terrible problem, and everybody. I've got here. I think Harvey Keitel. I think he was a. I've got people from from 20th Century Fox, and I've got the whole of the group Queen here, and I'm trying to think who else. It'll come back to me in a moment. And what the Queen were going to do. We're going to do the music of it, but they had a boy, a cellist, who they always used to do their arrangements, and he was going to write a score. And so we've got the Royal here, but he only managed to write 1.5 minutes of score. Well, I said, how on earth could that possibly have happened? He said, well, will you come over? So I went over there, and they're all standing there, and they said, you've got to help us. I said, so what will you do? Well, I said, I mean, I can, and perhaps you can tell me, who was it? Who was the big shot, the money man?
Oh, was it Goldsmith? Harvey Goldsmith?
No, it wasn't Harvey Goldsmith. It's absurd. I can't remember. The Italian.
Oh, yes. Carry on. I shall remember in a second.
I can't remember. Yes. Anyway, this big shot. It wasn't Orson Welles, but somebody is equally famous. We'll tell you in a minute. Anyway, he said, could you write a new score by Monday? I said, if you got Beethoven and Bach and Chopin and Tchaikovsky here, they still couldn't, all working on it. You couldn't finish it by Monday. So, but I said, I can. And he said, well, how long will it take it? Well, I said, you'll have to fire the orchestra because they've got nothing to play. Oh, that's... that's terrible. I said, well, it won't be. You'll, and I'll need at least 4 weeks, I would say, because we've got to. Have you timed it? Have we timed it? Nobody knew. I said, well, if you haven't timed it, that'll add another week. It'll take at least a week to take all the timings. So anyway, I got started on it and I wrote it. And what happened? I did write a score virtually for the complete film, but of course they had scored their very big hit song, Flash. That was really that was written, and it's a very, very good song, as we all know. And they put all of their energy into that, but they had not, and they thought that somehow they could adapt that to fill all the rest of the. It's a very big film. It's about a 3-hour film. They thought it could be somehow extended, but I said it can't be. You've got to write fresh music for it, and it's got to agree with all the scenes. So I set to work on it, and eventually I got the timings, and eventually got. But of course, it made the manager of the group. What's the name of the group? Queen. Dino De Laurentiis. I finally got it. The producer was Dino De Laurentiis, who's very big in Hollywood, of course, and a great producer of many great films. So I was working directly for Dino, but of course the boys, the Queen, they wanted, and the manager, they wanted to try and actually do some of that scoring, not with me, but use it or get more a credit round. So that it got all very difficult. But I did record the entire score, and Dino was absolutely thrilled with it, and so was everybody else. But then after that, Queen, actually, I took 1 or 2 phrases from. Now, who is the lead?
Freddie Mercury.
No, not Freddie Mercury. The lead guitarist,
Brian
May. Brian May was he had a theme which went and he said, "Could you use that?" And I said, "If you like, yeah, I could use that." And if you listen to this, if you listen to it, you will hear it coming in all sorts of guises. But I would wrap it up with about 60 violins, 3 trombones, and a harp. So you want it probably, but that is, every time that comes, that is the copyright of Brian May, and the frilly bits around the sides, copyright of Howard Blake. But it's always been disputed. But it was quite fun, and I wrote a lot of music, and I think it somehow works, and it's often been cited as perhaps the first sort of crossover between a rock score and a classical score, and somehow enmeshing the two into one. And I think that's quite a good assessment of it.
Yeah, that's certainly interesting. So on to what's probably your most famous work now, The Snowman. Am I right in saying that it was actually your idea to make it a silent film with just music and no dialogue? Yeah,
that's absolutely true. People try to think I'm making this up, but I can tell you how The Snowman happened was this. I'd actually written that tune in 1970 when I sort of got out of the rat race, and I went down to Cornwall to recover and have it, and I wanted to write a symphony. Yeah. And I wanted to stop doing commercials and write a symphony. And I thought I wanted a theme for the symphony, start the symphony, that expressed perfect innocence and peace. And I wrote Walking, the music of Walking, I wrote it down on the back of an envelope. And I came back to London eventually, and I got back in, but I limited the mad writing stuff all day and all night, and I got into a more reasonable lifestyle. And then one day I tried to find a place for this tune, and I tried to write a symphony, but it didn't sort of happen, and it didn't sort of fit in. Yeah. But I knew it was a very special song, and I tried one or two things which didn't really work, and then one day, I'd been over in Canada. I'd been over in Canada to write a film called The Rainbow Boys, yes, with Donald Pleasance. And I'd met the director, Jerry Potterton, he was actually more of an animation director than a live action director, and which interested me. And I'd also been working with a chap called Dick Williams, Richard Williams, animator, and I'd done the Pink Panther credits for Henry Mancini with him. I actually wrote that credit sequence, and so I knew about through Mancini and through Jerry, I knew about cartoons. That's animation cartoons, and Jerry came over. I hadn't seen Jerry since that was way back sort of 1975 something. And Jerry came over to London in 1981, and he rang me. He said, "I'm here to do." He said, "I'm going to go. I've got to pick a check up from a cartoon company in Soho called TVC, Television Cartoons." Yes, and he said, "Could you meet me there, and we could go out to lunch?" I said, "Yeah, sure." So I went up there and I walked into TVC, and there the owner of TVC was a chap called John Coates. Oh yeah. And he said, "I know you. You're Howard Blake, aren't you? I met you in New York at a premiere." "Correct. I am Howard Blake." He said, "It's interesting to meet you." He said, I make cartoon films. And he said, "I've just made an 8-minute, what we call an animatic, a little sketch for a cartoon film called The Snowman. And would it be very out of order for me to ask you to look at it? Because I had a score written for it by somebody, who shall remain nameless." And he said, "I don't think it really works. Would it be out of order for me to ask you to look at it?" "No, it wouldn't." I said, "I'd love to see it." So he showed me this 8 minutes, and it had all this awful tinky-tonky music on it. I said, "Well, I don't just turn the music off and just run it for me again." And I said, I looked at it and I saw this image of the snowman and the boy. And I said, "That is the most fabulous image, that great snowman in the sky with the boy smiling and being." And I said, I've got a tune that I've had in my head for something like 11 years, and I've always looking at a play which is a sort of transcendent tune, which I think would work marvelously on this piece of film. So he said, John said, "I don't know what the hell you're talking about." I said, "Well, could I do a demo for you and see what happens?" And he said, "All right, do a demo." So that in a couple of days after that, I went into Avengers studio and I recorded what was essentially the basis of the score of The Snowman. And I fitted it to this 8-minute, just the demo for what we hoped might be a cartoon, maybe only that long. But anyway, I put that, it was just on piano. And John said, when I'd done it, it looked great with piano on it. And John said, there's a company, curiously enough, right next to the studio called Channel 4, and it opened today. This is in 1981, October 81, look it up. And he said, and I was talking to Jeremy Isaacs. He's running. And I'm going to take this demo in and show it to him. So I said, well, I said, before you do that, John, I said, I think you could develop that 8 minutes, I think, into a television half hour. I think it would run for half an hour. And I think you could make a whole story without dialogue. It doesn't need dialogue. You could do it all with music. and it would be absolutely wonderful. So John said, don't be daft. He said, you've got to have dialogue. Of course you've got to have it. I said, well, I haven't got dialogue on the demo, have I? No, he said, you haven't actually. I said, well, show it to Jeremy Isaacs. And if you decide to do this without dialogue, I will let you have this music and we'll write the score. Otherwise, I will not let you have the music. Oh, that's okay. So he went in. You have to be quite firm in this film entertainment business. He went in. Yeah. He went next door, spoke to Jeremy Isaacs, ran this 8 minute. And he said, "It's fabulous." He said, "We'll make it. We'll make a half-hour television film with nothing but with Howard's music, and with the TVC's animation, and Diane. There was a girl, Diane Jackson, will be the animation, the cartoon director." So it was happened simple as that. They said, "We'll do it." So we set about it, and it is still actually a revolutionary thing, and I think it's the only film of its sort with absolutely no dialogue and sustained totally by the music. And originally it wasn't going to have a song in it. I just got the music only. It's like. Like that. Yeah. That's how it was. When we put it together with the animatic, that's the pencil drawn images, which it was just piano. And curiously, I made a recording on piano of the whole thing, and we put it to the first animatic of the whole film, and it was delivered to my flat here in Kensington, where I am now. Yeah. And I was on the phone, and I was waiting. I thought I've got to play this on my VHS, see what it looks like, see what the film looks like. At this moment, two friends of mine actually arrived, and they said, "What are you up to?" And I said, "I'm just gonna run this thing called a Snowman, an animatic with just piano track." And he said, "We'd love to see that." So the three of us sat down. And my friend, who was in the business, he was a film producer himself. And when it got to the flying scene with just piano, he said, "That would make a great song. You've got to." Yeah. I said, "Well, the boy's lips aren't moving. How can I do that?" "Oh," he said, "doesn't matter. Nobody will ever notice that his lips aren't moving." I said, "I suppose you're right." So the very next day, I went out into Hyde Park, and I booked a deck chair and took a picnic. And I sat down and I wrote the lyrics of "We're Walking in the Air." Wow. And I finished by 4:00 that next day, and they've never changed since. So that's how this revolutionary film came into being.
Yeah, that's incredible, actually. The film is just synonymous with Christmas, I suppose. Whenever you hear that music, you know it's Christmas, and it's on every Christmas Eve, and it will be again this year. So you have essentially made the sound of a lot of people's Christmas Eve.
Yes, I'm not really quite sure what it's got to do with Christmas.
That's true. Yeah.
But you're quite right. It has become synonymous with Christmas. I think it's just because it's so ice. There's wonderful snow and ice and the blue sky, and it's like a sort of the Christmas day to end all Christmas days, isn't it? Yeah. You're flying through the sky. It's something everybody would love to be able to do.
Yeah.
So it's been with me all. It's a long time now. It's actually exactly 40 years now. to think about, because it was actually October 81, and it's now 2021.
Yeah. And a lot of people wrongly assume that Aled Jones sung Walking in the Air in the film just because he sung it a few years later. But it was actually Peter Ottey that did it in the film, wasn't it?
Well done. I'm really glad you said that. And I'm glad you know that. Peter Ottey has really had the wrong end of this, had a bad time out of it, really, because it was when Aled just had the nous to get it to EMI and get it made into a record. And just actually to tell you about how that happened is quite amusing. I mean, this was, when was it? Yes, it was 1985. So it was 4 years after I'd done the Snowman. And the big time advertiser, Maurice Sarchi, actually rang me himself, which was Mr. Sarchi rang me, and he said, I've got 6 new toy shops, huge toy stores I'm opening in London, and I want to use your music. That wonderful Walking in There, I want to use it for that campaign to open my toy shop chain. Can we use it? I said yes. And he said, can we have that wonderful boy Peter Ottey sing it? I said yes, I'll ring him right away. And he said, well, we need to do this actually fast. We need to do it this week, as soon as you can do it as possible. Anyway, so I rang Peter Ottey, and the voice said, hello? I said, can I speak to Peter Ottey? She said, this is Peter Ottey speaking. I said, don't tell me your voice is broken. He said, what is it? So his voice had broken. So, I said, I'm so sorry to hear this, because it's actually a rather wonderful job. I can't now recommend you for, because you no longer sing trebles. So, and so I had to search around, and I had seen on a BBC show earlier that week, I'd seen a boy singing in a concert from Cardiff. And I said to Sarchi, I said, see if you can find out who that boy was who sang on BBC from Cardiff. And came back and said his name's Aled Jones. I said, well, book him to come in tomorrow to EMI Abbey Road and book an orchestra, and we'll do. So couldn't have been the next day. It was that week. I think probably it was Tuesday when I was asked, and it was about Friday of the week. And anyway, I actually couldn't be there because I'd got another recording session going on. So I actually delegated the conducting of it to somebody else. And Aled Jones came in and made a recording. And this is quite, and it wasn't going to be a record. And I had a very good connection with EMI. I was actually under contract with them for a while, and I rang the head of Abbey Road, and I said, you've got a boy coming in, he's singing a song of mine, and I said it just might be worth doing a single, actually, if you've got him there, because there'll be an orchestra, and he's got a very good voice, and it's just an idea. See what you think. So EMI actually did, while they were recording the 30-second commercial, they also did a quick recording of the 3.5-minute song Walking in There, which when released soared to the top 10, went to number 3 in the hit parade. And that's how that happened.
Yeah. And when Aled Jones sung it, I think it was a few years ago, he sung the song with himself as he was older, and you did the arrangement for that, didn't you?
Yeah. And actually, I still use that in the stage show, which is about to open in the West End. Yeah. If you didn't know that.
That's incredible. Now, recently there was actually a sequel of The Snowman, but you didn't do the score. Were you ever asked to do it?
No. You something to do with a dog?
Yeah.
Yes. What did you think of it?
I don't know. It was all right, but I guess the music was lacking, wasn't it? Because you'd think they would at least include Walking in the Air to kind of harp back a bit.
Oh, well, you've hit on a real raw nerve there. the people who made the Snowman actually did not like me becoming famous for having written the music for it. They wanted themselves to be famous for having made the film.
That's weird.
This is like the entertainment business for you. So they virtually stopped speaking to me when it went into the top 10. And they actually decided that they would make a film with their wonderful animation and without my music, and show that it had nothing to do with music. It had to do with the story and their animation. So they made Snowman and a Dog. I wasn't even invited to see it or anything about it. And it was a complete flop, as far as I know.
Yeah, it's mad.
So I think it deserved to be a complete flop.
Yeah, it's weird because, most of the time the score composer gets fame and the filmmakers are all right with it, and rightly so.
I've come across this envy of music envy actually throughout my career. You'd be quite surprised. I've had complete scores ripped off large feature films because everybody was saying that is such a fantastic score.
What?
I don't like it. You have to play yourself down, pretend you're not there.
Oh, that is so bizarre.
I've got one of those. I got it here. If this was television, you should see it. Agatha, the film Agatha. Yeah. I did the terrific orchestral score. It's probably, for me, one of the best I'd ever done. But it and people were raving about it before it even got into the cinema. But the star of it actually did not like the fact that everybody's raving about the score, and they weren't raving about her. And so she actually had the whole score removed. She actually, to do that, she had to have the producer sacked. I won't say the names of these people. He had got the producer sacked, and that this producer was instructed to get rid of my score. So that's another example, and that's an even more drastic. At least my score got onto the Snowman, but they didn't even give me a chance. I would have loved to do the sequel of Snowman, but I wasn't asked, and they said it's not to do with you. So it's difficult. It's a very difficult business, and you've got what are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to write a lousy score so that you don't offend the leading actor? What are you supposed to do?
Yeah, it's an odd one. Well, what are you getting up to at the moment? I guess you've got the stage show, but is there anything else that you're working on?
Well, one thing that might happen. I've written a story called Tuck the Cobbler.
Ooh.
And I actually originally wrote it for Dick Williams as an idea for a full-length animation film. And just recently, it is being taken up by a distinguished animation cartoon company, and it looks like it might turn into a full-length cartoon film. So that's rather exciting.
Yeah, that sounds very exciting.
Other things, I've got another extraordinary gig, which the head of Radio 3, which is the intellectual branch of the BBC's music. Jonathan Manners came to see me in August, and he said, I want to do an arrangement of this whole Snowman film for nothing but singers. I said, what would that sound like? He said, well, that's what I'd like to find out. So I gave him permission to do that and didn't think much more about it. But the latest news, actually, as of yesterday, is that it's going to be run on BBC 4 on Christmas Eve and on BBC 3 on Christmas Day. And the narrator of it will be Stephen Fry.
Oh.
which is quite a big piece of news, actually,
Yeah.
which you can put out on your
Yeah.
this radio show, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, cross promotion. Other radio stations do exist, and you can listen to Radio 4 and Radio 3 for this.
Well, you don't have to, but you're asking me what I'm doing. That's another thing I'm doing. So I'm waiting to see the finished score in order to correct it. I don't mean correct it, I mean approve it.
Well, where are we able to keep up to date with you and just find out about you and stuff?
Well, if you go to www.howardblake.com, you will be able to see everything that I'm doing and everything I've ever written. And you can see there's an autobiography and there's a complete list of works. And at the top of the first page, as you open it, you'll see news, which has exactly what I'm doing right now.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much for joining us here this afternoon. It's been great having you on the show.
Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope I haven't upset anybody. If I have, please forgive me.